Universities like this have a vibrant activist community, but guidance published this week that blocks publicly funded bodies from taking part in boycott campaigns hasn't gone down well.
What the hell? That's crazy. No, that's bad.
I think it's just an attack on freedom. If I don't want to buy Israeli goods, I don't want to buy Israeli goods.
This university students' union has voted for a boycott, divestment and sanctions policy against Israel, and it's unions such as this one that could find itself on the wrong side of the government.
Is a boycott violent? Is a boycott violent? If I don't go into a shop to buy settlement products, is that violent? Or is it violent to sell arms to governments, which then use them for war?
I think they're trying to stop people having opposing opinions to what they want.
The guidance states publicly funded institutions will lose the freedom to boycott goods and services from companies involved in the arms trade, fossil fuels, tobacco products, and including those from Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Others agree with the government's stance that boycotts undermine community relations and fuel anti-Semitism.
In our latest polling of Jewish British people, 84% of them said that they believed that boycotting Israeli products constituted intimidation of Jewish people, and 77% of them believed that they had witnessed anti-Semitic incidents disguised as political discourse about Israel. So this is obviously something that's of import to many Jewish people.
In the UK, boycotts were an important part of the campaign against apartheid South Africa. At the Students' Union, activists say actions like this remain a vital tool.
I think it's disgraceful that the British government has decided to intervene in this way, attacking local democracy and stopping councils from making ethical decisions around investments. I think the public has every right to be able to intervene in these issues, to talk to our elected officials and to have an impact on corporations that we disagree with, involved in the arms trade, against sweatshop labor and for Palestinian rights as well.
So what would you say to those that say that boycotts of Israel are anti-Semitic?
I think it's a dangerous implication to make. I think it's a dangerous implication to draw a relationship between the human rights violations and treatment by Israel of the Palestinians on the one hand and the Jewish community around the world. I myself am a Jewish student. An increasing amount of Jewish voices around the world are making very clear the fact that one is a political question and another is an ethnic group or religious community, however you want to call it, and trying to make a connection between an entire group and a particular political view, I think, is extremely problematic.
The guidance comes at a time when Cabinet Office Minister Matthew Hancock is visiting Israel, and the government says that locally imposed boycotts can hinder Britain's export trade.
Well, I'm joined now by Alina Bawata from the National Union of Students, whose members regularly vote to boycott products, and James Serene from BICOM, an organisation which aims to promote relationships between the United Kingdom and Israel. And we're not quite sure whether anything's actually changed, because there's no criminal kind of consequence to having a boycott, and it's always been possible for people to sue, I guess.
I think some of the reporting was a bit overblown, but as I understand it, the guidelines that the government is going to publish is going to remind people of their duty under procurement regulations, that they can't discriminate on the basis of nationality, and that's a civil penalty. But I think what's interesting about the boycott proposals is that the government is on the side of what we know from our polling that the British public believe. Most of the people in Britain do not want a boycott of Israeli products. They believe that they'll hurt Israelis and Palestinians, and only a small 12% believe that boycotts will do anything at all. I think what's important.
Well, let's just pick up on that, because I mean I looked on Google just now. There's at least 60 active boycotts going on. They don't really work, do they? I mean, they've had very little impact on Israel, for example.
I think I'd largely disagree. We've seen a lot of students and young people and activists campaigning to boycott and divest from companies like Veolia, for example, and put pressure on them and their relations to, facilitating travel between settlements. And that is seen as a huge success. But really beyond that, we have seen far more engagement. As you said, as was previously stated, people want non-violent options in relation to, facilitating a solution, and this is one way to do it.
Well, let me suggest that when a British minister goes to Israel and makes this pledge, it suggests that the boycott is hurting, is it?
I think what's important here about the boycott is, the economic impact may be minimal, but the issue here is about those who are close to what is a complex, tragic conflict between Israelis and Palestinians that we all want resolved, that this kind of armchair activism where we bring in boycotts, and effectively, let's be honest, a boycott is doing nothing. It basically says we're not going to do anything. What we really need, and the friends of Israel and the friends of the Palestinians and the UK can play an important role here, is for there to be dialogue, crucially interfaith dialogue between the Israelis and Palestinians. That is what solves the conflict. Boycotts just put up barriers. People stop talking when there are boycotts.
I would ask that we look through history. Look at the case of the uplifting of apartheid in South Africa. If people didn't take to the streets, if people didn't campaign and enforce the implementation of a boycott, as we did within the National Union of Students, and we have a proud history of that in relation to Barclays, then, where did those conversations that went on for decades and potentially even hundreds of years in some cases go? And I think that we've been having conversations. We've seen continued expansions of settlements. We've seen continued abuses of human rights, of international law totally thrown in our faces. And we have no trust in the processes that exist, nor the international laws that are implemented.
The only way that anything's going to be solved. I mean, people who know the facts of the conflict know this is nothing like apartheid. That was a criminal regime running a racist policy. This is completely different. Both parties are trying to reach a solution. They've been talking on and off for many years. Only just recently they became very, very close to a solution. We need to keep working at that. And the other thing, and this is, I think, what the government does really have a sensitivity towards, is that boycotts in local communities are incredibly divisive. They whip up all sorts of ill feeling and fear. And that the same thing happens in student unions. For Jewish students,
can I just ask one thing? Because everything's been about Israel, but what about other countries? I mean, do you boycott Saudi Arabia, for example, for the human rights violations there? Do you boycott Russia, for example, for human rights violations there?
So I think I'm feeling slightly on trial as the leader of all boycotts worldwide. What we're talking about here is the right to boycott, based on the fact that we feel there is a violation of human rights, of ethics, and we want to implement them and enforce them. And some people will use words like the non-violent solutions, as the case of boycotts, boycott, divesting, and sanctioning Israel do, for example. So I say, we have to come back to that question itself, that if people feel that this is in violation of those rights, then by all means, implement such solutions. And, these guidelines that are coming out will not just affect Palestinian activism or BDS for that matter. It expands to those campaigning on fossil-free, those campaigning on, trade, divesting from trade.
But I'm bound to come back to the question of, aside from the intercommunal tensions which you've described, on the ground, it doesn't have any impact, does it? There is no effect in Israel at the moment.
Well, the sides don't want a boycott. I mean, trade
but
between
is there
Israel
any
and Britain.
effect?
I think there is a minimal effect, but let's be honest, and this is also part of what Matthew Hancock is doing there. Britain needs Israel. We need Israeli high-tech. We need Israeli scientific cooperation. 1 in 6 drugs on the NHS are from Israel. We need Israel. But I think the silence on the issue there about other boycotts speaks volumes to those people who will say there's some sinister undertones here.
We have to leave it. We've run out of time. But Malia Bawata and indeed James Serene, thank you both for coming in.